1+1 Forward, the podcast powered by the apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. This episode is the beginning of our summer series about Forged in the Dark games. I'm your MC, Rich.
And I'm your MC, Rach. Tonight we're joined by a special guest today from 1-7 Designs, John Harper.
Hey, John!
Hello, hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Very excited to have you on. Lady Blackbird is still one of my favorite RPGs ever.
I appreciate that. I think you still probably hold the record for having played and run it the most of anyone on Earth, so your title is intact, I think.
Thank you.
Oh, we need to commission a trophy for that.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on to talk about Forged in the Dark. Let's jump on into Setting Position and Effect, our new segment for this summer series.
Setting Position and Effect.
John, you created Blades in the Dark, which was the first Forged in the Dark game. What inspired you to create this game in particular, Blades itself?
It came from a couple different places. First being inspiration from other media, television and video games, particularly the TV show The Wire, which is about Baltimore and crime of various sorts from street level to politics, and the video game Thief, an older game about sort of this industrialized fantasy setting and a skulking thief in the shadows running around doing scores. And I had run a bunch of sandbox games, particularly Stars Without Number, for quite a while, and was thinking it was time to try the grand sort of fantasy sandbox Thieves Guild thing and see if I could make something that would make that engine run and play with the factions and the underworld bosses and all the different elements that go into that, and try to create some tools to support players and GMs to do that at the table.
What were your design goals?
Initially, it was just trying to do that classic Thieves Guild thing that other games have tried, and it was much more focused. But as we play tested, we realized that there was a lot of potential to expand it out and create different sorts of underworld crews, different sorts of character types to explore a broader space. And the design goals shifted from that robbery simulator to something a little more character drama driven and more built around building an organization from scratch and trying to work your way up the rungs of the factions in the city. So all of those systems had to come in to support that, to show progress as a crew as a whole. Once we got to that point in early playtesting, the goal really focused itself on the crew and how do you define a team of characters working together, and what tools can we add into the sort of role-playing toolbox to support focusing on the team of characters first and foremost.
You mentioned the role-playing aspect. One of the aspects of Blades in the Dark is that downtime is an actual phase of play where, I guess, conventional style of role-play of talking in characters rather than actually actively being on the job would take place. And that downtime, you have a certain number of choices. How do you feel that affects the amount of talking in funny voices role-playing that takes place in a Blaze in the Dark session versus, say, a more conventional style RPG?
In my experience, that downtime is often where the most role-play heavy sessions occur. I've heard people say that they treat downtime almost like a board game or something, and they kind of tick things off a list and and sort of go through the motions. I don't fully understand why people decide to switch gears that way and sort of stop role-playing in that mode. In my experience at my table and all the various Blade shows I watch, downtime is always the very juicy, character-heavy RP sessions. I think it just depends on your background as a gamer, your expectations as a player, and maybe some experience with the system too helps. When you're first starting out, it can feel maybe like you have to learn that process of what can I choose from, and there's a lot of people that want to optimize, which Blade is not a game about optimization. But when you give people choices and opportunity costs and stuff like that, they'll try to think of how can I optimize my downtime, and can I get an extra action for this, and can I heal a bit more, and I only got 1 tick and I needed 3, and they maybe switch into that mode of thinking, which is interesting to me as a designer to try to figure out what's cueing certain groups and certain players to switch gears and think of it as a sort of non-RP part of the game when that's not. It's not something that happened in our playtesting at all, and it's not something I see a lot personally, but I have heard it from some groups that shifting of perspective that can happen.
Do you have any advice for players who are new to Blades in the Dark in order to bring more of that role-playing aspect into downtime?
Most of my advice is in the book. There's a player's guide that talks about the goals for the players and approaching the game from a certain mindset, including playing your character's passions and drives as kind of first and foremost. And again, as opposed to optimizing or playing safe or trying to weasel out advantages in the game systems. And so going into downtime, it's a structured phase of play in the same way that the score is a phase of play, but the operations of roleplay are the same. You still say what your character says and does and feels, and the scene work around going to satisfy your vice is just like any other scene in a role-playing game. And the speed at which you want to go through that to sort of like get back on the job is up to the group. That's something you can dial in. And some groups do want their downtime to be very quick, and they set a scene really quick. They say a few lines in character. We sort of get the gist of it and we move on. That's fine. A lot of people enjoy that version, especially if you're playing short sessions where you're doing a score in a couple hours on one night and then doing downtime in a couple hours on another night instead of all together. I think really sinking your teeth into a downtime session can help with that, can help players sort of think of the evening's entertainment as being doing those downtime activities, having free play, doing role play, as opposed to let's just rush through this real quick and get back on the job again. But it depends on the group. Like I said, it's definitely a personal taste component of the game. And it's the same thing with scores. There's some people have reported that they spend 3 of their 4-hour session in downtime really role-playing and like getting into interpersonal dynamics with the crew and all this stuff, and then they do a score real fast in an hour and then jump back and forth that way. So it's like most of the answers I'm probably going to give about Blades tonight. It is a table set thing. There are a lot of dials in the game, and that's one of them. One takeaway I would say, which I talk about in the book, is not putting too much pressure on yourself and the other players. Blades is a game that is meant to be played over a long, many sessions. So you have time to tune that in. If you play a session and you're like, man, I don't know, it felt like downtime wasn't really clicking and I wish we did more role-playing, that's something you can work on in the next session. And over time, develop those skills as a group and figure out the right dynamic at the table. So lowering your pressure on yourself is definitely some advice I would give, and fly casual and like let it work itself out over time is definitely part of what the game is meant to do.
Very cool.
Yeah, linger more in the moment and learn to linger.
Yeah, just sort of let it develop.
I like that it has the capability to adjust.
Exactly. And that's sort of my philosophy about gaming in general. It's such a group dynamic thing, the hobby itself, that developing the pace and the moving spotlight and supporting your fellow players and all those dynamics, it's like playing in a band. It takes time to gel, and giving yourself permission to explore and change things and mix it up instead of sort of trying to stick to some ideal form that you imagine the game might have. That's generally a good thing in gaming across the board, and especially in Blades, which is very group-driven. It relies a lot on the players and the GM to create the structure of how the game is going to play and where the focus lies.
On that note, we are going to move on to our second new segment for this summer series, Progress Clock.
Progress Clock.
Progress Clock is the section of the show where our guests will discuss a specific Forged in the Dark game. Obviously, with you, John, it should be clear which game we're going to talk about. So let's talk a little bit about Blades in the Dark. What's the game about?
Blades is about a crew of daring scoundrels in a haunted industrial fantasy city that are trying to raise themselves out of misfortune and lack of opportunities and advance their agenda and their status in the underworld to rise up on the rungs of the faction ladder and prosper in a city of even larger forces and bigger scoundrels than them.
I really like that there's a playbook for the crew, or a schema for the crew, which I know it's had to have existed in other RPGs, but it was really the first time I had run into something that did a really solid take on mechanizing the group as a whole, while everybody still got to play individual characters that were part of that group.
Yeah, like I said about the design goals, it's definitely a big focus of the game. The crew character sheet as a shared object of play that everyone contributes to and tracks your status as a team over time. It came in pretty early on in the design and developed, of course, through playtesting, but yeah, it was always a big focus. And as the game design developed, characters got more important. They used to be like very slim, simple sheets, and they were meant to come and go more often. They were the game was a little more deadly, a lot more deadly actually. And so the crew focus was really high, but over time we realized that we really did want to sink our teeth into these characters and develop them over a longer period and let their rivalries and friendships and stuff develop. So the crew and the characters kind of ultimately, I think, kind of hold equal weight. Mm-hmm. But it is unusual in gaming to have that team sheet aspect.
It's really interesting to hear the origin of that, the idea of the characters being more disposable and the crew being more important, and then that balancing out over time. Because just speaking from my perspective, I would have assumed it would have been the other way around. It's like we have these characters, but they all need to have this important thing they're working on together. Therefore, that needs to be a piece.
Yeah, it did shift over time. It started in one place, and then just through play and iteration, we twisted it all around to where it ended up.
What mechanics are different in Blades in the Dark than, say, someone coming from Apocalypse World?
The two things you definitely will notice right away are the dice. It uses dice pools as opposed to 2d6, which a lot of not all, but a lot of PBTA games use. Mm-hmm. And there are no formal moves in the classic Apocalypse World sense. That's a little bit of a lie. There kind of are. But if you're very familiar with Apocalypse World and you first come to Blades, you won't really see that. You won't see a sheet of basic moves or that kind of thing. The playbooks will be much more familiar. They do have sort of player-facing moves on them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, using a dice pool system, which you roll a bunch of d6s and keep the highest one, and then the lack of a shared basic move sheet will probably be the first two things that jump out as different from Apocalypse World. In practice, the game does have some moves, and one of them is the action move, the thing you do when your character's in danger or under some threat. And that's the controlled action, the risky action, and the desperate action rolls are move-like in their structure, sort of. But in practice at the table, what you'll find probably, if you're very familiar with Apocalypse World, is the process of doing an action roll is a little bit like improvising a move on the fly, sort of. Mm. It feels that way to me anyway. After playing tons and tons of Apocalypse World, there's a point for me where after playing AW a lot, that it started to happen in play where, it wasn't like my prep work as a GM where I was off designing custom moves. It would happen on the fly and play a lot more. And it's not exactly the same at all, but if it's a familiar feeling in Blades to do the action roll, kind of feels like a custom move. Just for right now, this moment when you're trying to surreptitiously draw your gun under the table, it's like we're building a little mini move for that using the tools.
Talking about the whole setting position in effect, kind of like a custom move, that's a really interesting take on it. All role-playing is a conversation, but in Blades in the Dark, every move is a conversation, right? Because in Apocalypse World, if I trigger a move, I do the thing. I roll the dice, and we start to resolve, and then the pause might happen as I look at my list, only get 2 out of the 3 for whatever reason. But here, it's all in the upfront, which I think is a very big change from the expectation for some Apocalypse World. But then phrasing it as it's like we're doing a custom move makes a lot of sense. That's a really interesting take on it, John, that I had not heard from anybody I've talked to about running Blades or playing Blades. That's interesting.
Yeah, it definitely takes time to get speedy with it when you first start playing. And I sort of true with Apocalypse World too. I think there's 15 moves or something that you might want to deal with in Apocalypse World, and at least when you're starting out, and that can be a little daunting sometimes to shuffle through those pages. Which one is it? Are you going aggro? Are you manipulating? And it takes a little while to get your feet.
Wait, is this going aggro or is it seized by force?
Exactly.
Oh God!
The classic conundrum. Although Second Edition did a great job of sort of clearing that up, but
Absolutely,
But,
a
yeah.
great idea.
It's true, yes.
And you had a certain blog from way back in the day that really helped me in those.
Yeah, good. And Blades is the same way. At first, you're kind of like, okay, we need to have this conversation about the situation you're in. Is it controlled? Is it risky? Is it desperate? What effect are you expecting to have on this person? Are you gonna take him out in one shot? Is it gonna be a long drag out fight? Is it gonna be a thing that we have to do in pieces over time? Getting used to having that conversation in not necessarily a quick way. It's not always good to do it quickly. Sometimes you want to really sink your teeth into it and really interrogate the fiction and ask all those questions. Like, wait a minute, is it the other guy did turn his back, right? And oh yeah, he did, right? So you can like bring in these little details if you want to. But just like learning how to use the moves of PBTA games to support your goals in the moment of play, it's the same with Blades. You have to learn how to do that and develop that skill of doing that little mini move moment of setting your risk level and your effect level and sort of talking about the fictional situation. Which again is another one of those things that players who have played games that don't ask that of them can struggle when they first start, because they can't just roll against a DC or something. Everything has to sort of stop, and we have to have a talk about how we're engaging the rules and who's standing where. So it takes some getting used to.
John, talk to me a little bit about the resistance roll, because I think people coming from Apocalypse World may not be ready for this thing, and it's interesting.
It is a strange mechanic in all of RPGs. I don't know if it's entirely unique, but it's odd. It's basically a system that lets a player say, no, that doesn't happen to my character. That consequence doesn't come true. I don't actually take that wound that you said I did. Or whatever the consequence of the moment is, the player can simply just say no to that. It automatically succeeds. And then we do a dice roll to find out how much stress it costs the character. And stress is one of your key currencies in the game that you can spend to boost your rolls and help teammates, and also as resistance, sort of to avoid harm or notice or consequence or whatever. It's always on the player's side. The GM can't inflict stress on characters. The players always choose when to take stress. And the deal with the resistance roll is it's a random amount. You don't really know for sure how much stress it's going to cost you out of your limited pool. So it introduces some doubt and makes you ask yourself those questions about, how much do I really care about this? Is it worth it to me to take the stress cost? Or maybe I can just get bundled up and thrown in the back of the wagon and carried off somewhere. Let's see what happens there. Maybe I don't want to spend the stress. But since it's in the player's hands, they can always shut it down. The role isn't a can you resist or not. The answer is always yes, you can. It means that the GM can push very hard. The GM can inflict really bad consequences when the situation calls for it, in a way that a lot of games don't let the GM do. Sometimes you have to sort of pull your punches or be careful and don't overdo it. And it's easy as the GM to kind of go too far or not far enough sometimes, or you have to walk on eggshells or whatever. But in Blades, there's nothing that you can force on anyone. You don't have that power. So you can always hit them hard when the situation calls for it, and they can say, nope, not that. I resist that, and automatically succeed.
Very cool.
I find it interesting because it does let the player have agency in terms of a little bit of fictional positioning that normally would not be in their control.
Yeah, it's rooted in the character. It's the characters, they're having a moment in the fiction. We see the resistance happen. They twist aside at the last second, or it's not as bad as it looked, or whatever that moment is, but on screen, so to speak. But that moment happens. It's totally in the player's control. They don't need anyone's permission. They don't have to get buy-in from the GM or whatever. It is a fully player empowering tool. And as we were developing the game, we didn't have it at first. And the game was really hard on the characters, extremely hard on the characters. And we realized having that tool in the player's hands, it lets you as a player be a little bit of more of a co-author of the tone and the style of the game. You don't have to resist that deadly wound. You as sort of a co-author of our fiction making can say, oh yeah, this is where my character dies. They got him. You could resist it if you want and not die, but you don't have to. And so it gives you this sort of shared authorial power. And a lot of the systems in the game work on that principle that the GM and the players are very equal in kind of authority. The resistance role just helped make that extra clear.
From my perspective, Blades has a fairly edgy, fairly gritty setting. Do you think the resistance role helps facilitate players to explore those tones that normally would not be, I hesitate to use the word, brave enough to explore those?
Yeah, for sure. I think for some players, knowing that you always have that fallback, that you're not just going to step in the pit trap and die or whatever, I think it can definitely help people be a little more bold, which is the whole point. We want characters that are leaping off rooftops and doing these daring moves. So having that safety net, I think for some players it definitely helps for sure.
John, what's your favorite move or mechanic and why?
It's hard. I'm going to cheat.
Okay.
As a GM, it's the devil's bargain mechanic, which is an offer made by the GM or another player to the current player who's rolling dice to say, I'll give you this bonus die, and there's a catch. And that catch will come true regardless of how the roll turns out, success, fail, whatever. Classic kind of thing, like, you're going to get a bonus die to sort of sway your contact here, but you can tell you're burning this bridge with them. They're just not going to trust you the same way anymore. It's that sort of thing. It's the hook. It came from one of the players in our playtesting games noticing that I kept doing that as a GM, making these offers. There wasn't really a bonus die attached back then, but I just kept doing that as a GM, and they said, this should be a mechanic in the game. This is fun. And so it grew into this formalized thing, and it's another way of getting bonus dice that doesn't involve stress also, which is a nice thing as the GM. You can take your foot off the gas a little bit. Some players will burn their stress so hard. You can see them starting to regret it partway through a session. So you can say, hey, I've got a devil's bargain for you. You don't need to stress yourself any further. You can still get a bonus die, but it comes with the consequences that maybe something the GM wants to see introduced into the game or another player wants to see introduced. Or you as the player rolling can suggest a devil's bargain for yourself. You can say, maybe they're my sister actually, or whatever. If you want some dramatic reveal or something like that, that's another way to offer it in sort of improv terms.
Nice.
So as a GM, I love that. I love having that little sneaky offer to throw into the mix. But my favorite mechanic as a player is the clocks system, which is just a way of tracking progress visually on the table. Apocalypse World players know all about this, but in Blades, the progress clocks are more player-facing, generally in PBTA. Often the GM is kind of using them on their own. Not always, but sometimes. But in Blades, they're like, I think of them as like the player's kind of UI for what's going on. And as a player, I really love to be able to look across the board and see opportunities and threats and, oh, right, we're only one tick away from getting that. We should work on that. Or, oh, yeah, we're only one tick away from losing that contact because you took the devil's bargain and you swayed them and they don't trust us anymore. And it's kind of like that pause menu in a video game where you can see your quest log and your status with the different factions and go, oh, right, I should go back to that place because I never did the thing. Since roleplay is such a verbal medium often, or at least it was all of us only playing online with shared whiteboards and stuff. Having the clocks on the table was a way to just remind everybody of what's going on in the bigger picture sense, but also in the moment to moment, how we raise the alarm yet kind of sense. So as a player, I appreciate that shared space just visually to sort of like track this game state together so we're all on the same page.
Well, I think it is time to check our own clock because it feels like it's time for the score.
It's time for the score.
In the score, our segment of actual play for the Force in the Dark Summer Series, our guest hosts some aspect of the game for just a brief demonstration. Stolen, John, you might remember the old days, like the Forge booth, the Indie Press booth, of like, hey, let's do a quick demo of this game to like get a taste, a flavor of it. So what do you say? Maybe we try to do a little bit of Blades?
Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
All right, I'll be playing Plussy the Cutter. What's your lurk named?
I play Curtis the Lurk. Plussy the Cutter. It'll be a good time.
All right, so we're going to do a quick little scene here in Blades in the Dark. We have our Cutter and our Lurk, the classic duo, the fighter and the thief, so to speak.
What?
Normally when we'd be playing, the two of you and your other crew members or NPCs would have come up with an approach to a score that you wanted to do. In Blades, you don't plan your scores in character or as players. You skip the planning part. You just sort of pick in general the thing that you're interested in, and we're just going to pretend out of all the opportunities that your crew has been faced with, you've learned the location of Lord Strangford's logbook. He's one of the people that runs the Leviathan Hunters and is on the city council, very high-ranking city official. And you know that noble families jealously guard their Leviathan hunting territories, and the occultists and soothsayers that track the Leviathans in the Void Sea, their routes and their hunting grounds and stuff are very well protected. But Lord Strangford's logbook has gone missing. The family's keeping it a secret. It's fallen into the underworld, and one of your contacts knows that there's a fence that's trying to set up a sale of this to representatives from other families. It would normally be out of your reach in a vault somewhere or on a Leviathan Hunter vessel somewhere, but even your ragtag Tier 0 crew might be able to get your hands on the logbook during this auction or sale that's happening. And it's happening at a place called Scroggs, which is a tavern.
That sounds great.
And you're very familiar with it. It's in an area city called Crowsfoot, which is where your crew is based. It's a place ruled by street-level gangs. On every corner is sort of controlled by different turf. So in normal course of play, you would tell me, okay, that opportunity, you have several things on the table. Let's do the logbook thing. And then I would ask you, okay, how do you want to go about this? Do you want to assault the place with force? Are you kicking down the door, attacking people, ripping it out of people's hands, running down the street hard and fast and loud? Do you want to sneak around and surreptitiously lift it maybe, or do something like that? Maybe you have occult powers you could call upon.
Well, Curtis is a pretty good sneaky and lifter.
Yeah, we've got both here, right? We've got the violence expert and the sneak expert.
It almost feels like one of us is a distraction, but I wonder which one is the true distraction, I think is going to be the big question.
That'll be the question, yeah. And so the approach is just the sort of apparent thing that you're doing, and any skullduggery and flashbacks and misdirections can happen on the fly. So if you choose assault, that could in fact be a misdirection. It doesn't have to be the actual way you're getting the book. It's just sort of the initial approach for the score.
What do you think, Curtis? Assault as a misdirection for your sneaking?
See, I was leaning with being the sneaking, like intentionally kind of botch the burglary for the assault so we distract all of the security and then just go in guns blazing. That might not be the appropriate road of action.
That's totally fine. Yeah, if you want to be the lurk who's, oh, oops, you caught me, as the opening maneuver, I love that. I think that's great.
You in for this, Rich?
That's what we're doing. Flussy is all about it.
Cool. So now we would make an engagement roll. An engagement roll basically tells us the starting situation. It helps me as the GM frame the scene, the circumstances that you find yourselves in. I have a rough idea of what's going on now, your approach. So there's a system for determining the dice you roll and the engagement roll. We can gloss over that right now. There's some questions that you answer about how you've set up for this, who the opponents are, the tier of your crews, and various things. But in this case, since you're not going after Lord Strangford directly, who's a very high tier, very dangerous enemy, you're going after the fence, which is much more in your league. At the end of our determinations here, we would say that you have 2 dice to roll for your engagement roll. Any player can roll that, and that'll tell me as the GM how intense and dangerous the opening moments of the score are for you. Whoever wants to roll 2 dice and let me know what the high number is.
So we're rolling 2d6, but only one of them count.
Only one of them counts.
Rach, go for it.
Oh, you want me to go for it? All right. It'd be a 5 and a 6. Which one counts?
The 6.
The highest counts, the 6. That's perfect. So that tells us that you are not in a desperate position when we start. You're not in a risky position. You're in a controlled position when this starts. So Scoggs has a secret back room with like a secret door. And that's where this auction is going to take place for the logbook. There are various representatives from the noble families, valets and butlers and servants of various sorts that have tried to dress down and blend in and have done a terrible job of it. They're sticking out like a sore thumb. Everyone knows that they're here for some secret business. The tavern owner, Skog himself, has closed early and driven the riffraff out. and they're going to go back and do this auction. So in a controlled position here, Rach, you get to tell me exactly where do we find your lurk when the action begins here? Have you already enacted your misdirection plan, or are you just about to spring it? You're in control of the situation right now.
Yeah, I think we immediately open on Curtis being busted by like a low-level security officer being like, look, I was just looking for the bathroom. I have no idea that there was something valuable back here. Like, and trying to kind of build a more elaborate story to try to gather all of the attention of whatever staff are here. Just so we kind of like make a scene.
Nice.
And pull as many people as possible.
Great. You're like already in the secret room where the logbook is, and like they've stumbled upon you and are shocked. And the main security guy is this freelancer who works in Crow's Foot, goes by Nails. You know him by reputation. Just one of those, like, no neck, and he's like scraggly haired and wears this sort of waxed fisherman's coat. He's got a hold of you and is like squinting and looking like maybe he recognizes you. I'm not sure. Hey, he calls out, get in here. And the secret door slides open, and the other security, this woman you don't recognize, she steps through. She's got these like ropey muscled arms and scarred knuckles. She's like a prize fighter maybe. And she walks directly up to you. What are you doing in here? Who are you? And like they start all like conglomerating around, and you see the servants getting nervous behind you. You can make an action roll here to pull off what you want to do in your control position. Try to draw everyone's attention to you, giving Rich's character an opportunity to act, it seems is the goal here.
Yeah.
You get to choose which action you roll. You choose that by saying what your character does, essentially. There are 12 actions in the game. They're there on your sheet. But it's your free choice. You can pick any one, and you're in a control position to try to pull this off. Which action is your character undertaking here?
I think it's going to be a finesse. It's sort of like a suave, trying to sort of shift around to pull the attention towards me and pull people away from where Curtis understands the book to be. To make space for when Plessy unleashes with his big strike. Like, I want to socially disarm these people so they're going to be knocked a little bit off kilter when it all goes down, but I also physically want to move them over.
Nice. Yeah, so it's almost like while they think they're detaining you, you're actually moving the group of them to a different part of the space. Okay, so you're going to make a finesse roll. You're in a control position, which means your risk is very low here. Even on a failure, things don't go super bad. So if you want to, one of us can offer you a devil's bargain to take a bonus die on your roll if you feel like you want a bonus die. You can push yourself by spending 2 stress to get a bonus die.
I have a possible devil's bargain.
Yes.
You mentioned that Nails might recognize Curtis.
I did, yes.
I put forward the possibility that during your escape, he recognizes one of Curtis's plans and, this is totally Curtis.
I love it.
I'm totally into that. Oh, we've done this scheme before. Oh, no.
Nice. So, Nails recognizes Curtis is a thing that will happen because of the devil's bargain. I would probably make a clock.
Great. How many dice am I rolling for this?
So you get a bonus die thanks to Rich's devil's bargain for you. So you'll be rolling 3 dice total. And I'm going to say this is... Effect is another part of the game where we have your position, which is controlled, and then your effect level, which is sort of like me as the GM setting expectations for like how much you can get away with here.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be just this like sweeping success that accomplishes exactly what you want? Or is it going to require like a piecemeal sort of thing? In this case, I think it's great effect. I think you're playing exactly into what they expect. They expect to have control of you. They expect to sort of manhandle you out of the room. You're playing into their overconfidence extremely well. So I'm going to roll those 3 dice and keep the highest, and we'll see how it goes.
Oh, God. Not well. So my highest was a 2, and there's 2 ones in there.
All right. The snowball has started to roll. So with a controlled position, on a 1 to 3, you falter. You can press on in the moment by seizing a risky opportunity, which means you essentially get to try again at greater risk to yourself. Or, because you're in a controlled position, you can abandon this little scheme with no ill consequences to your character You won't get them in the position you want, but they won't realize that something's up and maybe there's another member of your crew around. There's no bad outcomes if you just give up now. Or you can press on and push your luck with them.
That's not fun to give up now. We're going to press on.
That's right.
Plus, he's relying on me.
Yes.
You took the devil's bargain, right? You might as well go for it. So in this moment, you're trying to finesse them. And this prize fighter, this woman, she's just almost immovable. She's got this incredible stance. She's not being moved, and you're trying to finesse her, so you don't want to like do anything violent to reposition her. And the little movements and finessings that you're doing are not working yet. She's not paying enough attention to you to like guide her with your eyes and stuff like that. But you realize you have this opportunity. If you can move her, everyone else will follow. They'll fall like dominoes. So you get a reroll, basically. You get to try again at risky with your 3 finesse dice. Good luck.
Yeah. What? Okay, that was better this time. There's a 6.
Yay!
Nice. Yeah, so on a failure with risk, with a risky position, we could have gone to consequences, harm, all kinds of stuff can happen there. But on a 6, you do it without complications. In Blades, it's like Apocalypse World. A 6 is like a 10+. 4 and a 5 is like a 7 to 9. You do it with complications, and then 1, 2, or 3 is like a miss, like a 6 when it's in Apocalypse World. So this is like a 10+ on your acting under fire, essentially, is what's happening here. So yeah, you do it. You finally... Well, you get to tell me, what finessing kind of move do you do to move this prize fighter and everybody else?
I think what I do to provoke her is I pretend to try to slide away her weapon. And that grabs her attention.
Nice. You continue on the path of, like, getting caught.
Hey, I'm not the badass here. We're making space for the true badass.
So
she gets to feel powerful. She catches you in the act of trying to slip her weapon out of her holster and, no, wait, not so fast, and they drag you away out of the secret room, the auction room where the logbook is, leaving the secret door slit open and drawing everyone's attention, especially the servants who are here who don't want any kind of altercations or trouble during this touchy situation. So they're just transfixed, like watching this, like, should we leave? What's happening? We're not used to rough housing such as this. They're more high society types. So Rich, where's Plessy? Where are you about to strike from? What's your position?
So we flash back to some time earlier at Scroggs where Plessy and other members of our Tier 0 crew actually go up to the second story and find this window where we currently see Plessy is perched, and there's a rope that's affixed, so he's going to be able to like swing down in and go right into the secret room, grab it, and beat up whoever's in his way and run like the Dickens. That's the plan.
Nice. So flashbacks potentially have a stress cost. It's a player mechanic. It lets you do what Rich just did, which is awesome. And it's the reason why we don't do planning in the game, because you're able to have these flashbacks. Mm-hmm. And generally they cost 0 stress. They can cost up to 2-ish or so if they're very outlandish. Like, actually, I'm one of the servants and I have an entire outfit of noble clothing, and that kind of stuff you can do that, but the stress cost will be higher.
Oh man, my second story window seems so much less cool than being a servant, but yes, I'll
play to your strengths. Assault is definitely where you want to go.
Swashbuckling.
Play to my strengths, sticking with second story.
So yeah, or it can cost coin, if you want some elaborate contraption and that kind of stuff. It's a thing you can pay for, but in this case, it's perfectly in keeping with the plan. It's not very elaborate. In fact, it's very straightforward. So
I have an idiom.
I'm going to say 0, no stress cost for that flashback, and you're in position to swing. It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong here, are you crashing through the window of the auction room?
It sounds like I am now because you mentioned that.
Okay,
so yes, that sounds so much
heard
cooler.
Window. I wasn't sure where the window was.
I was thinking sitting at a window, but I think crashing through the window sounds more fun. So let's do that.
Cool. So just as you get caught, Curtis, accidentally trying to get the fighter's weapon away, over her shoulder, as they turn you around, you see that this window of it, which is all painted over. It's from there's no real sunlight in this city. People don't really need windows anymore. So this one's all painted over black to hide the secret room. And you hear the strain of a rope and a winch pulley or something. And a body whistling through the air.
Yes.
This seems like a dangerous action to take. Plussy,
Sure. I would agree.
which action would you like to roll to accomplish this?
Sorry, this is where I'm a little less familiar with the particular skills. Wreck? Does wreck feel right, or skirmish? Because I'm not fighting somebody, I'm just busting
You
through.
can pick any action and tell me how you're doing it, and then that'll help me set the position. So prowl, for instance, is kind of a general like athletics, parkour, and sneaking thing. Wreck sounds very much like what you're doing. But skirmish, as a fighter, you're good in a fight. You're good in a scrap. You're good at like tackling people.
Yeah, I just don't...
putting your shoulder into a door and that sort of stuff. So if you say skirmish, that's my thing. I'm going to smash through this window the way that I smash a dude down when I'm in a bar fight. That's totally fine. I'm going to say prowl would be safer. So let's make it a desperate roll. But you can totally use skirmish. That's totally fine. And that's your best thing.
Cool. Let's go with skirmish. I'm going through the window like I would somebody that said something about my sister. So.
Nice. Like I said, that helps me as the GM kind of set the position here. A controlled parkour moment would maybe be risky, even could be controlled. A wild smashing skirmish through the thing is desperate. Wreck would also be an action here. Again, players can choose any action they want. Often, as an aside here, something that can happen in Blades is players are used to sort of asking permission to the GM for, can I roll this? Can I roll that? Is it okay? Does it apply?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a rule in this game. Players just pick what they want and describe what they're doing. But that's another thing that takes a little like getting used to. You've got to sort of like adapt to that dynamic. So yes, we're going to do a desperate skirmish action.
Okay.
Just as before, you can push yourself. You can spend 2 stress if you want to add a bonus die to your situation here. Or we could offer you a devil's bargain if you would like one of those.
I'd love to hear if anyone has a devil's bargain in mind.
Also, because of his sort of setup action for you here, Curtis, Rach could spend a stress on Curtis's sheet to give you a bonus die as a helping die. Because clearly Curtis is helping with the smash and grab operation here.
It's the whole reason we
Exactly.
did a 1-2 punch. Come on, give me that stress. Help me out.
I will give you a stress. Possibly that's being manifested as like I'm screaming like I've been thrown out of better security vaults.
Nice.
As the crew is dragging me
Nice.
out.
That's great.
Take that bonus die.
So the helping, does that mean, like, is that it?
No.
Or can I helping?
You can have helping, and then you can have either devil's bargain or push yourself.
Oh, so it's either. Okay.
It's either, yeah. I think an obvious devil's bargain for me as the GM, I always want to like give you costs. So you already have introduced this idea that Nails and maybe Nails' crew is going to remember who did this in the future. I think smashing through this place where secret auctions are done, often on the behalf of the rich and powerful sometimes, is going to draw heat in general.
Ooh, that's
If
a
the-
mechanic.
If the
Oh,
Bluecoats
that's scary.
find out about
I
this, if the nobility in general find out that one of their secret auction houses is being smashed apart by ruffians, the overall heat in the neighborhood and for your crew will rise. So that's my inclination as the devil's bargain, is to say it's +1 heat on this job because you're just going real hard.
We're blown out a window. I mean,
That is a very logical consequence, but I am not willing to raise the heat of our entire neighborhood. We're tier 0. They will come stomp on me. So I'll spend that stress to give myself a 4th die
Cool.
instead.
It costs
Thank
you
for the
2.
offer.
Helping is cheaper. So
Okay.
It only costs Curtis 1, but it costs you 2
Okay.
to push yourself. So
I'll still do it.
Yeah.
This is pretty important.
Desperate
Here we
move.
go. Whoa, pair of 5s is all I've got this
all right,
good.
nice. That's a success. It's a 7 to 9 in Apocalypse World terms. On a desperate action, on a 4 to 5, you do it, but there's a consequence. You might suffer severe harm, a serious complication, or have reduced effect. I don't think severe harm. It's a window. You're a tough cutter. You just go through that thing, no problem. But I do think reduced effect is interesting here.
Okay.
Instead of swinging through clean, window smash, tuck and roll, grab logbook off table, still in a full sprint, I think instead it is smash through knock the plinth over, logbook goes skittering out into the bar. You slide outward at the feet of this situation that Curtis has developed. So it's right there in your grasp. You can just essentially pick it up. You rolled a success, so you can snatch up the logbook. But the servants are standing there looking at you aghast. The security all turns at the sound of this and sees you on the ground there. And you're not home free. You're still here. You're still in this scrum of people.
Do we want to call it right there?
Sure, yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, that's a great beat to pause on, I think.
John, that was a fun AP, and I really appreciate you coming on +1 Forward to help us open up this summer series talking about Forged in the Dark games. Speaking about your baby, the very successful Kickstarter that you had for Blades in the Dark that is out now.
It's been my pleasure. This was super fun to do, and thanks for jumping in. I know that after all these episodes, you've gotten very good at being in demos, and it was really fun to just bring that old Forge Booth energy back.
John, if our listeners want to follow more of your work online, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter, John_Harper, JOHN_HARPER. Also on itch.io. All my games and stuff are over there. It's johnharper.itch.io. Evil Hat publishes my games, so if you go to Evil Hat's website, you can get Blades and Agon and those games there. And 17design.com is my website, where I've got some older design stuff there, Lady Blackbird, that kind of stuff. If people want to check out earlier designs. But mainly Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter if anyone wants to hit me up, ask questions, whatever.
Well, thank you once again, John, for coming on.
It was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
+1 Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelkey. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at +1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for +1 Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.
Can you hear the footsteps in the shadows? Can you smell the metal tang of blood on the air? Can you feel the veil between worlds slipping away with each heartbeat? The Between is here. The Between is a tabletop role-playing game about a group of mysterious monster hunters in Victorian-era London. These hunters learn about monsters and killers throughout the city and conduct investigations in order to neutralize them. Over time, they become aware of the plans of a criminal mastermind who is pulling the strings behind the scenes. They will eventually be forced to confront this mastermind in order to save Queen and Country. The Between is directly inspired by the TV show Penny Dreadful, but also takes inspiration from British horror classics, the works of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, pulp-era media, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and from Hell. It's powered by the Apocalypse and uses the mystery system from our hit game Brindlewood Bay. The Between comes with a 129-page rulebook, 7 playbooks, 10 scenarios or threats, a mastermind campaign sheet, reference sheets, and a supplement called London at Night, The Unseen. The Between PDF is available now on the Gauntlet Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/gauntlet. The Between will be available on DriveThru RPG starting June 14th.